important to realize, as any student of Torah knows, that the entire body of halacha and Jewish tradition contained in the Shulchan Aruch is the product of European Jewish civilization that existed over 1,000 years, from the days of Rabbeinu Gershom Me'or HaGoyla, throughout the period of the Rishonim, Rashi, the Balei HaTosfos, the Rosh, later on the Poskim and the Shulchan Aruch, down to the last great sages in all the great yeshivas, in all the Hasidic centers of Jewish life. All this was all part of European Jewish civilization, which suddenly perished, which was totally destroyed. And this has momentous importance in our own thinking, remembering that a Holocaust, a total collapse of our Jewish world took place in our times.
V'nikdashti besoch b'nei Yisrael is the great mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying the name of the Almighty. The Rambam in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah Perek He describes a principle in the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. In a case when, chas v'shalom, a government rises to annul the observance of mitzvahs on punishment of death, a Jew is obligated to sacrifice his life rather than be forced to transgress. Rabbi Joseph Elias was born in Leipzig, Germany in 1919. He attended the Shamshon Raphael Hirsch High School, headed by his father, Dr. Marcus Elias. Upon graduation in 1938, he escaped from Germany.
Less than 70 years ago, World War II broke out. It was a vast conflagration. It swallowed 4 continents and killed tens of millions of people. It was set off by Germany under the rule of Adolf Hitler, Yimach Shemo. What was his goal? He spelled it out himself. More than anything else, he wanted to destroy the Jewish people.
It was as if there were 2 wars taking place: the World War between Nazi Germany and the Allied nations, and that of Germany's attempt to destroy the Jewish people and their religion. Beginning in 1939, Germany invaded and conquered country after country in Europe. Wherever the Nazis captured territory, they soon repressed any expression of Jewish religious life. Practicing a mitzvah such as tefillin, bris, shofar, or minyan were punishable acts, sometimes at point of death.
Throughout Jewish history, the Jewish people had attained glorious heights when they guarded the Torah. But they had also suffered terrible periods of persecution. In World War II, the German armies committed terrible atrocities and murdered more than 1/3 of the Jewish people. It was indeed an awful period. And yet, the Jews preserved their faith, and the spirit with which they were imbued by Kodesh Baruch Hu lit up even in the darkness of that time. In this documentary, you will hear survivors who lived through the horrors of the war tell you about the courage and self-sacrifice, the Kiddush Hashem and Mesiras Nefesh that could be found in those days.
It's important also to dwell on the Kiddush Hashem that took place on the part of many, many Jews, how they perished, what their lives meant, how they performed V'nikdashti, the great mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, both during their lives and during their death.
The following dramatic story is told by Mr. Avraham Obstfeld, a native of the Jewish community of Krakow, Poland, who witnessed a neighbor fulfill this mitzvah at the start of the war.
They took out the Sefer Torahs. This was the beginning of the war. They spread it out on the ground, and they caught Jewish people, older people, younger people, and they made everyone step on it. What should I tell you? Not everyone could resist. There was a family in Krakow, low family, very low family. One of these brothers, I don't remember the first name, because I knew quite a few of them. He stopped. Ich werde nicht verschwinden, ich werde nicht verschwächen meine Heiligkeit. Means I am not gonna humiliate the things that are holy to me. So he said, ich werde dich erschießen. I am gonna kill you. He ripped off his shirt. Kill me, and I wouldn't do it. Sure enough, he did. Auf den Gemara said, Bucher Rabbi Yesh Udem Koina Luma Beshuachas. Rabbi was crying. He said, there are such things that a person can buy his Olam Haba in one short minute, in one short second. If this is not the one, I don't know what is. He killed him. He did not step on the Sefer Torah.
The obligation to sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name doesn't only mean that we can do it through dying for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's sake. It's living as a model of Kiddush Hashem. That is our obligation, that ought to be uppermost in our conscience as we go through daily life. How by a small act of chesed, how by representing Torah life in its most beautiful, noble sense, we are being Mekayim v'nikdashti b'seich b'nei Yisrael.
With the conquest of Poland, the Germans no longer allowed Jews to live in their homes. Instead, Jewish populations from entire regions were forced to live in blockaded neighborhoods known as ghettos. The largest of the ghettos was in Warsaw, Poland, where over 400,000 people were crammed into a small neighborhood surrounded by a brick wall and armed guards. Inside, basic necessities such as bread and water became scarce. Tens of thousands of Jews perished from starvation and disease. Mr. Joseph Friedenson, born in Lodz, Poland in 1922, was the son of Rabbi Eliezer Gershon Friedenson, Hashem Yinkom Damo. Joseph and his family were forced into the Warsaw Ghetto in 1941.
Well, it's well known that the hunger in the Warsaw Ghetto was quite great. Many people just all the time they were hungry. There wasn't enough food. The Germans didn't let in food. And it's very strange that the Germans did allow, even in the hours of curfew, in the evening, they did allow the children to to roam the street and beg from the others. Now, was one, in my memory, it's one of the most tragic sights. Now, you can imagine if you have a sister, a little 4 or 5 years old, how if you see such a child crying and begging for a piece of bread. And this was the sight of many streets in the Warsaw Ghetto. I remember our windows looked out to the streets, and there were literally hundreds of children, almost at every house. And they were crying and begging and saying, Jeden werft herab a Stückerle Brot. Please throw us down a piece of bread. And they say, a pizzale Brot, a little bread. It is one, even today, and after I saw much even death and killings and beatings, this is, even till this very day, it's most tragic. And I remember one evening, it was about 7:30 or 8 o'clock, it was in the summer, was still light, and my father went to the window, and we had left in home, say, a half a loaf of bread, and my father took this loaf of bread and cut it into little pieces, just like this, wrapped it in a piece of paper, and threw it down one by one. And after a while, the half of loaf of bread was gone. We were 2 boys. I was a little older, I had a younger brother. And we were wondering what will be tomorrow. We knew that we weren't sure that my father had a few zlotys to pay to buy another bread, and it was, even if you had it, it was hard to get. And we were really we were a little worried. I mean, and my father probably felt, I mean, at our look, and he said to us, children, did you have your supper? Because he said, well, you probably are worried about tomorrow. He said it in Yiddish, auf morgen wird Gott sorgen. For tomorrow, God will provide. And very strange, it really happened. I mean, I don't know how, but next morning, an aunt came and she brought in a bread. It's really a little strange. In the Warsaw Ghetto, the Germans did allow some entertainment. For instance, there were a few movie houses in the Warsaw Ghetto, which were functioning in the evening after everybody had to do his work, of course. And there were a few concerts. So the Germans did allow some entertainment. But at the same time, they did not allow a minyan. They did not allow people to assemble. What was forbidden. And a minyan or a shul or a stable was forbidden. All the shtiblech were closed, all the shuls were closed. Under punishment, I mean, Jews who were caught assembling or davening at a minyan, I mean, they were severely, sometimes beaten, and sometimes even there were cases where Jews were shot on the spot, I mean, just walking out. Nevertheless, the fact is that in almost every courtyard in the Warsaw Ghetto, there was a minyan. And Jews did assemble under all the threats and with all the danger. They just defied all the orders. And Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, not only on Shabbos, also in the middle of the week, in Mincha, Maariv, in the morning, early in the morning, before people were driven out to work out of the city or somewhere else. Jews put themselves at risk in order to daven and to pray.
A further step toward the plan to destroy the Jewish people was the establishment of concentration camps. The camps were military-like prisons, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers with machine guns. Inside, hundreds of thousands of Jews were robbed of all their personal belongings, and crowded into bare wooden structures called barracks. Plaszow was a concentration camp built on a historic and sacred Jewish cemetery. The Germans knew that forcing Jews to walk on graves would further demoralize and humiliate them. Moshe David Mandelbaum, Zichrono Livracha, was a boy of 15 when he was taken from his home in Bobov, where his father, Rabbi Ezriel Eliezer Mandelbaum, Hashem Yinkum Damo, was the distinguished Rosh Yeshiva. When Moshe David was arrested, his mother slipped him a chauffeur. Once inside the Plaszow camp, he became the leader of a work group where he succeeded in saving Jewish lives and creating opportunities to perform mitzvos using his courage, wits, and emunah in Hashem.
It became Rosh Hashanah, and we decided it has to be a way to pray Rosh Hashanah Tfilis. And we made it so to try as possible hidden from the German eyes. And the decision was the best place will be, since it was on a big hill. So in one side was straight with the street. In the other side was about a floor and a half deeper. And we covered up that entrance. And since I had the chauffeur, I was selected to blow chauffeur. And I had my people were religious from Bucherim, and we hide ourselves over there by lunchtime. And we gapped around the davening. And we davened and we blow chauffeur. When we were finished already, it seems that one of the German officers noticed that a lot of people are grouping over there. And since we had spies watching them, he gave us a signal, and everybody ran out from the other side, and he didn't catch anybody. We knew we can't go the other day in the same place, so we picked another place. And we davened both days Rosh Hashanah and we blew shofar. That was in Plaszow. But that was a very, very big Mesiras Nefesh.
Moshe David continued his courageous acts of emunah, preparing for Sukkot.
The parts of the barracks were made prefab, walls. And they brought them with trains from Germany. And we had to load them. And they gave us to carry the box. 8 people carried one board. All the way up, and the cemetery was a big hill. Over there we should station the barracks. It was a very hard job. In the wall, since the wall, heimische English, and I was always such a mishugener, thinking of crazy things. So I says to them, boys, now is the time to build a sukkah. They start laughing. Are you off your mind? I says, we carry the barracks, right? We have to put them down. One board, it wasn't a board, it was a big part. All the way, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up. Let's put them down, and the place was where the top was standing a German with a gun. That was already the end of the camp. People should have run away. And it was right behind his eyes. So he understood yet that we wanted to get it high, and that's why we do it. I didn't go into his mind what he was thinking then. And I tried to make conversation a little bit with him, to get him friendly, but he didn't want to catch it. And since we got already the right height, so I made the guys cut off branches from the trees, and we covered them up. This got him already. He starts to scream. You verfluchte Juden, Koist Jews. He starts screaming, what do you think this is? That's work? Playing with branches? Whoever hired you to do playing with branches? I'm going to kill you all right here. Came to play here? So naturally, nobody had a nerve to come out and say a word. But I, a little schmeiger, and walked out, and I walked over to the Vierge. I started hollering at him that we got the order to cover all this up because they were afraid for the English pilots here that they're going to put bombs on it. In this way, it's going camouflaged. Ach so, now you understood why I do that. And this remained a secret for the whole camp. Nobody knew that, only our group which carried the barracks. And I don't know from where and from how people find out. When I came with my 2 pieces of bread to make Kiddush in the sukkah, there was staying a line, and it's plain not to be understood how the Germans didn't notice that. We went through one door to the sukkah, made Kiddush, ate a piece of bread, made a Elisha Sukkah, walked out the other side. And slowly everybody went in, till the whole group came. And nobody could have imagined that this is going to happen. I think at least 2,000 people risked their life to make Kiddush in the sukkah with the bread.
Mrs. Pearl Banish was a teenager when she was imprisoned in the Plaszow concentration camp. A student of Sarah Schneerer and Miss Zilla Orlean in the Beis Yaakov Seminary of Krakow, Pearl and her fellow classmates resisted the Nazis with acts of chesed for fellow Jewish prisoners.
A story which happened in Plaszow. This was a concentration camp, not really the death camp. We were turned in there from the ghetto. It was in 1942. I was working for Madrich. This was a large factory. We were making uniforms for the German. Now I was sitting at my sewing machine. I was making the tops of the uniform, the jackets. And there were rows and rows of machines. I was sitting in one of the rows. Next to me was sitting Rivka Pinkusevich, a friend of mine. Across of me was another machine, sewing machine, and there was sitting a woman, Emma was her name. He showed already some signs of depression at that time. But she was working, we had to work to exist. All of a sudden, we were sitting and working on our machines. We hear the door open, and it comes in Jon. Jon was the Oberscharführer. This was the man who used to count us every morning and just point with his finger to this man, and had the adjutant take the numbers of the people to be killed next day. Now, we never knew who will be the one to whom he will point the finger. There was no reason for it. At his whim, he did it. Everybody was afraid because we never knew who would be next pointed to. Now we are sitting and sewing working on the sewing machine. The door opens and this Jon, this beast in a human skin, comes in. He was a short man. He comes in, and of course, our foreman tells us, get up, attention. We got all up to attention. All but Emma, that woman who sat next to me. And I kicked her with my leg, and I talked to her, Emma, get up, get up, get up. She didn't listen, she didn't obey me. Of course, you noticed everybody stood up to attention but Emma. So he came over to our side, pulled out his handgun. Oh my God, next to me sits Rivka. She was in a flush. She stood up between Jon and Emma, and she faced him. She faced him and she speaks to him. She speaks to him. Herr Oberscharführer, she tells. Sie ist noch nicht schuldig. Sie ist Meshuggah. She couldn't find the word for insane in German. He didn't understand the word Meshuggah. But he just was overwhelmed with that young woman who had guts to stand up to him and talk to him. An inmate, a Jew, a woman to stand up to him. He was so overwhelmed that he left his hand and he put the gun back into the pocket. He turned, he looked at her and again at her, and he turned around and said, Wiedermachen. Wiedermachen was the symbol of letting us live. Go on, was in German, go on, and left the room. Now, nobody would dare to do something which that young girl did. And she saved the life of Emma.
Not content with starvation and gunfire, the Germans were constantly developing more efficient means of murdering Jews. The concentration camp called Auschwitz was a peak of brutality, using poison gas to murder hundreds of thousands of Jews. As part of the human degradation before murder, Jews had identification numbers tattooed on their arms, like branding labels on cattle. Rabbi Gershon Weiss was born in Reichenberg, Czechoslovakia in 1933. Although his immediate family miraculously escaped, most of his extended family were not so fortunate. He heard the following story from a family member just after the war.
I have a cousin, she's still living, Baruch Hashem, in Bensonhurst. Her name is Frieda Weiss. And she was a very beautiful girl. And she came as she was taken to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, the Germans would try to make experiments to be able to have beautiful children. So they chose her to be experiment. It was a very painful experiment to find a way of cloning to have beautiful children. And she was given, everyone's giving a tattoo number, and she was given a tattoo number, and she had a friend or a relative who was doing tattooing, and she recognized that this is a special number. Well, she'll be taken to an experimental station to do this. And she told her, this is not a good number for you to have. If you want, I'll change it. And she asked the question, if you change my number, will someone else get it? And the lady says, yes. If that's the case, I don't want it. Yeah, a 17-year-old girl. I don't want it. That's what she gave up. And the Rebbe Moshe made a nest for her. She was shipped out of Auschwitz. And she survived the war.
Mr. Yitzchak Schwartz, Zichrono Levracha, was born in Nayerbatzer, Hungary in 1922. He learned in the Satmar and Kalev yeshivos. Yitzchak suffered in Auschwitz, Buchenwald, and Theresienstadt. He was marched by the Nazis 3,000